Hello everyone and welcome back to the CRDG Productions Round 1 coverage of the Black Bear Amateur Championships, driven by Innova and presented by the Southern Ohio Disc Golf Association. My name is Christian, and again, I'm going to be running commentary solo here for the remainder of this Round 1 action as we move into the back 10 second half of our first round coverage. We've seen a lot of ups and downs from our card over the first 11 holes here. And, you know, we did see a lot. We've seen a lot of action. We've seen some fantastic shots. And we also seen, some pretty big heartbreaks and some downfalls on the putting green, some trouble staying on some fairways. Hopefully our competitors are going to be able to get some of that tightened down as they start moving down the hill here, wrapping up our first round. Take a quick look at the leaderboard here with Mr. Kemper on our feature card holding down a solid 5-stroke lead through 11 holes. Connor is the only other person hanging around under par. And other than that, we have, a lot of people locked up in that just a couple strokes over par area. That is a pretty common place to be on this course, especially with the more difficult layout that the championship layout will present. There's a lot of differences on the course than what you would normally see out here. It's gotten a significant amount harder, and that is all for the challenge of wanting to be crowned champion at Black Bear. You're going to have to tackle it at its toughest. Now the back half of this course is going to introduce a couple more changes, and we'll get to those here in a minute. But first, let's go ahead and fly hole 12. This is the highest point on the course, and by this point you're probably out of breath after climbing up this entire hill, but the good thing is everything is downhill from here. Starting off here on hole 12 is a pretty straightforward par 3, just coming in at right around a couple hundred feet, and it goes right down this ridge. The big danger here is anything off of this fairway, really. It starts sloping down a little bit to each side and behind, and then before you know it, it's really falling away from you. So as long as you can throw something that just basically stays up and gets in the fairway, stays on the fairway, you're going to be fine. Collin throwing there. Jackson hitting something there in the middle. Looks like Dan's going to go putter here. I think that's his Nomad, if I'm not mistaken. And pulls it to the right again. And he does say at least it's right there. It does drop right there in front of him. Mike also throwing a putter, going for that right-hand gap. You can go either left or right here. Doesn't really matter. Just kind of depends on how you're wanting to attack it, with a slight turnover or something straight with a baby finish. Mainly just keep it throwing down with the slope. That way you don't air long and end up down on 13. Dan pitching up there, falling back off the left side of the fairway. Got Mike now trying the backhand Anheuser line, getting around there. He's going to put that just a little bit long in the basket, but he's going to have a putt to save his par. Jackson off on the left side. Almost looked like he was giving that a run. It kind of pitters just a little long in the basket. I think this Collin we're looking at back in the gap in the trees there. And miraculously hits the tiny gap, sails it long in the basket, and almost takes out Mike there. Dan looking to save his par from circle 2. Just can't quite keep that good putting streak going that he's had for the last few holes. That did look a lot better than his putts earlier in the round. I'm glad to see that that's starting to get straightened out a little bit. He had that one dead center on, just a little low. but from about 50 feet out. It's still a good bid, sat right down. We'll take his bogey. Jackson with an excellent, confident straddle putt there, able to knock that in. Collin the safest par. Cans that from circle's edge. And that is that Collin spin putt that he is known for, and he just rifles that thing in there. Mike opts to let him just leave that in. Go ahead and try to save his par here.
Come on, man.
Yeah, he's not happy about that. Leaves it just a little bit to the right. Catches nubs, but not enough to pull it in. So he'll be taking the unfortunate bogey there. All right, and we're going to move on over into hole 13. 13 is a par 4. This is going to be the exact same hole as last year, except that it is going to be a par 4 instead of a par 5. It's going to be a pretty demanding birdie to get. However, it is still pretty doable. Good drives are going to be either going left or right of that initial tree and just trying to get up to about here. Now, you're seeing the basket here on the fly-through, but that is not where the basket actually is. It's tucked back further and across this little creek for the tournament, and it is elevated. If you're playing for par and you come up short of the corner, laying up to about here is going to be a really good, second shot. It's going to give you a long putt, but an easy layup. And then right here on the elevated pillar where the mini basket is will be where we will find this pin. Collin going speed racer there. Going just inside that initial decision-making tree.
It was headed way off to the left, but then it hit something before it sort of flooded straight down.
He was saying there that it caught something but dropped straight. This tee shot is very, very demanding if you want the par, or if you want the birdie, sorry.
Subscribe to CRDG.
Thank you, Collin. Appreciate that. Dan here, he's throwing a streamline disc. I can't remember exactly what it is.
Wow.
I think a lift, maybe. And he puts that out there on a dandy of a line. Mike going for the inside gap. So the inside gap and the outside gap can both get you up there pretty well. It just depends on the kind of shot you want. If you want a straighter flight with a dumpy fade at the end, you'll want inside. But if you want something kind of moving steadily right to left the whole time, you'll want the outside gap there. Jackson throwing up one, getting lucky, to be honest, through a lot of those branches, but fading all the way back into the fairway. Did phenomenal with the placement on that, with a little bit of luck, if we're going to be a little honest here. So this little clearing right about where Mike is kind of the bailout zone, but it takes birdie for this placement completely out of play. Collin just barely tucked into that, and he's going with a sidewinder forehand and was trying to get it flipped up and then over, catches something, but luckily drops back. Standstill backhand, caught something, dropping him down there. Now here's Dan's second shot, and he's in a fantastic spot to try to attack this. Looks like he's going mid-range, something really overstable. And he's laying up to the traditional long placement there, it looks like. Now, so let's pay attention to this.
Oh, wow.
Off the front of the cage. That would have been a birdie for anything right there. Halfway up. That's about the halfway point between the tee and the basket. Jackson lays up for his par there. Dan actually with a longer birdie putt. See if he can keep the hot streak going. leaves it just a little bit low. So even on the elevated basket, where he was, his feet were almost even with the cage. So the likelihood of, oh no, likelihood of Dan's shot if he airballed that going way past was pretty high. So I just don't think he 100% committed to it. And Jackson, unfortunately, just wasn't 100% committed. And Collin also was not committed. Unfortunately, Collin, yes, I was recording that, is able to clean up the double, unfortunately, after a good drive and a good third shot, honestly, but rather unfortunate there. Yeah, you even gotta take the short one serious. Before you know it, little things like that can happen. It's happened to me. It's happened to everyone at some point. All right, and now the biggest change on the course for this year is the new hole 14. This is the start of the traditional birdie alley. However, this is now a combined par 4 of the old holes 13 and 14. So the play here is going to be getting something up through this gap, either just right where the drone flew or just to the right-hand side. And if you are getting greedy or really going for it, you can cross the creek in one. If not, laying up just short of the creek will do just fine. From here, the fairway will bottleneck and pull you back to the left to go through this last little gauntlet to keep you from being able to just drive most of the way up. Like I said, the correct play here is going to be trying to cross the creek in one and maybe moving back to the left and then playing the traditional hole 14's fairway. There is also a spike route over the top for your second shot if you land in just the right spot. Now, birdie is going to be pretty well out of question for most except for the best players.
Look at that.
And Dan flipping his over just a little bit too much, but catching that break in that gap later down the fairway, getting clean across the creek in one. Mike gonna try to follow those vapor trails there. Pulls it just a little bit, luckily kicks back to the fairway. Jackson with a halo disc of some sort. I'm not 100% certain what that was.
Those weeds, it may have just got hung.
Oh, this is nice. This looks great. Way to be, Evan Allison.
Collin with the Sidewinder, giving the shout out to the Allison crew. There you go. Not bad, Collin. Giving a good shout out to the Allison crew who came out a couple days before the tournament and completely remade that tee box. It was not in the best of shape, but they went out and really busted it and got that taken care of. Thank you, Evan and your boys who came out and really busted it, and the handful of other guys who came out and helped you. That was really awesome. It turned out well for the tournament. Mike here throwing 3. Still trying to navigate that first main gap that you got to get off of, and catches something, but luckily a second kicked him back over into the fairway. Jackson going thumber. I think that's a felon he has. Unfortunate kick off of that. Just big center tree there. Is now looking at just the backhand flex shot over the creek, and he's going to actually be laying up on traditional hole 14's fairway. Or, sorry, tee box. Collin, I do believe, throwing the same Sidewinder, that same champion Sidewinder there. Mike now getting to attack over the creek. And we finally made it to Dan's tee shot. He got clean over the creek. Unfortunately, is just a tiny bit pinched on the right-hand side. Looks like he's going thumber here. Unfortunate catch of something and kicks him down to the right. Second half of this fairway, the place you really don't want to be is to the right. So, looks like he started going down that walking path that you can see veering down to the right hand of your frame now. This path to the left is the fairway. And like I said, this is mainly just funneling you back to the left to bring you over and down from the top side down to the basket. Collin going high. Dan again going overhand, and that actually sails up onto the bank to the left. Mike throwing a great little flex line there. Dan trying to get out from that and catches something really early, drops him immediately back down. So try it again. And good flag saves him from going way down the hill. Looks like Collin hanging out in the junk back there. Giving it a run, coming up just short. He'll have that for bogey. Now this hole did come in as the #1 handicap, hardest hole on the course, averaging a stroke and a half over par today. I do 100% anticipate that number going down. I do believe that this hole will play significantly easier tomorrow now that these guys know how to attack it. But not a single birdie coming in on the day. I also anticipate that number to change. I think we're going to see a lot of people realizing how they should attack this tomorrow and being able to get in there and get the job done. It's unfortunate for Dan looking at a double bogey putt here after being the only one to clear the creek on one. And again, kind of getting back to some of those putting woes. Just a little bit low and bouncing it up. Not enough to stick. Mike also for now his double. Keeping the stance there, keeping the balance. And we'll move on to hole 15. Par 3, 279 feet. This has a new placement for the year. Traditionally, it is just straight down this path and on the left-hand side. Pretty well hanging right on the edge of a pretty steep drop-off bank there to the left. That is the big mistake you don't want to make here, is going left. We did decide that a little change for this hole was going to be necessary, so the long placement finally got put in, and it is going to be just a little bit longer than normal, probably about 50 foot further down and up to the right, which you can see now. Main play here is going to be a forehand that's going to go straight down the path and then dump up and in and just try not to hit any of these trees and knock you back down to the left. Jackson going thumber.
I say 4 on the which I was thinking. You got a par?
Whatever I wrote down. 5, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you said 5. Okay.
Some of the guys here trying to remember where they were at score-wise after a hole like that. And Collin sneaking left side of the trees. I think he's throwing a Zeus there. This is something he's very comfortable with, and I know this is only a 200-foot hole, but he's comfortable with that forehand. Unfortunately, just cleans it, and he's going to be way long. Mike, unfortunately, cutting in a little early, but he is going to be up on the bank at the very least. And Dan, is he looking overhand? Yep, looks like he's going to go thumber as well. This is not going to pan fast enough. He's going to be down and to the left. Jackson about a little over halfway down. can't quite get that to hold on to that angle and keep moving toward the basket. He's going to have a long, shallow circle 2 putt. Coming back at him for the par there. This one was right around middle of the pack. Did have a couple birdies. We'll see if they're on our card. Dan going to be way down here. Is he looking at... Okay, little backhand stall shot's going to get him up and drop right around circle's edge. And here's Collin from about 60 deep. Plants it beside the basket and gets one of the most unfortunate rollaways that we'll see. However, Dan with the excellent evasion techniques there stayed out of the way. And unfortunate not able to clean up that circle's edge putt. See if Jackson from about a pace inside C1 is able to clean up for par. Jackson has unfortunately lost a couple strokes in the past few holes. I'm going to add another one to that. He came into this back half of the course with a solid 5-stroke lead, and at this point he has been letting it slip. And I do believe that Connor is really making a push from one of those later cards to be able to get up and try to catch up with him. Dan with a putt that, a lot of conviction on that putt. He had a lot of commitment, just the line was a little bit off. Mike here trying to figure out a way to get a good stance between the log and that little sapling tree. Inside C1, probably about 5 meters. Putter corner pocket, right in the back of the cage. Just enough to get it to stick. And we'll have a handful of cleanups here as we get ready to move down the hole 16. Our last hole actually in the woods before moving back out to the home stretch of the course, which is going to be a handful of pretty open holes. Now, hole 16, again, 197 feet. However, this one is significantly easier, coming in as the 6th easiest hole on the course. It's only a couple hundred feet right in front of you. There is that gap to the left of the drone right now that you can pitch up a backhand anhyzer and try to float the left half of the fairway. Or if you keep something nose down with a little overstability, you can try to come in and fade right about here to move you back toward the basket. It's one of the more treacherous greens to try to stick on the course, as pretty well anything coming in on hyzer angle will pick up and roll deep and to the right. I've heard the ace play here is actually skipping off of that log, but still not 100% certain that I'll believe that.
Glad you stayed on your feet, and that should be
I was trying to get out of the way of the camera. I think I got in the
Don't worry about me. That'll be fine.
row, I don't mind. I tried to be down. Still thought it might be.
It's like Jackson here trying to take that backhand anhyzer line. Mike took the more traditional, the original hyzer look at it, and Jackson letting that float. Heard the local calls, and that was the original local gap before it got cleaned out to become an actual secondary fairway. That used to be a pretty well strictly local route. Collin knows that. He's watched me take that line a time or 3. He's now going to try it with the deputy and hugs it just a little too tight. And it looks like we're going to see a 2-2 split on left fairway versus right fairway, with Dan opting to go with the traditional route with the hyzer. Looks like mid-range, and he just releases that actually early this time. He's been having a late release problem, but he just kind of pushed that straight into that tree. He's going to chip it up, leave it a little too nose up. It's going to float right into the canopy, get knocked down early. Collin fortunate not to kick over into that junk over to the left. He's going to have a pretty well standstill clean look the whole way at the basket. Yep, and he's going to like it. You actually see, that might be his disc right there, but you see one planted real close. I think that is Collin's, as Dan tries it from downtown. A lot of conviction on that putt. Just sails it a little bit over, and he's going to have a circle's edge come back to try to save the bogey here. Looks like a little awkward stance. See if he can pick it up. Just pulls it a little right. Unfortunate. Big thing to realize, a lot of these holes out here on this course is if you're out of position, is laying up is a lot of times the best that you can do. Everyone dreams of those 90-foot makes to save your par from halfway up the fairway, but taking that bogey, taking your medicine, man, that's the best thing for it. Very confident putt coming back to save the double. Seems like we glanced right over Jackson's just phenomenal birdie there. And that was Collin's disc from his second shot, leaving him with a very clean par. And we still have yet to see where Mike's drive ended up. It looks like we can see it there now. He sat that thing right next to the basket. It is true, the best putter in your bag is the one you throw off the tee, because if you're putting that thing and putting it in the basket, you're close. And he proved it right there. He and Jackson get a stroke back. 2 of the only 3 birdies on the day, the last one being Ian Eblin. We'll move right into hole 17. Getting back out into the open, this hole has a lot more teeth than what is normal. There's an OB line stretching all the way up the right hand as well as down the left side, and it's going to tighten in with the tall grass here. All of that is going to be out of bounds, and then there is just a little bit of inbounds that wraps down and around the basket, so it just keeps funneling you in tighter and tighter and tighter the entire time, and you've got to be really, really accurate with what you're going with here. If you want to bite off a lot off the tee to make the second shot easier, or maybe even get you the eagle, you have to be extremely accurate. You see those white flags on the right, that is where the OB line, follows up the right-hand side of the fairway. Mike throwing out just essentially to the big bailout spot over on the left. The road places OB all the way until it gets to the tall grass. Jackson, I do believe, going felon again, just control hyzer, getting up into the middle. Little flare skip, got a little scary as it moved toward that OB tall grass. But stays in the short stuff, stays safe. Collin looking like he is getting the Zeus out again. Does fine with that, and that's actually going to be moving back toward the middle, giving you a very optimal angle back into the basket. Dan with driver. You will see a lot of players coming out here, especially with this OB, just trying to play a pitch hyzer up about to the mouth. And as long as that holds on, it looked like it was safe. This is that big bailout area over here. And like I said, the tall grass on the left and the right are both out of bounds. So if you just want to pitch just a big hyzer out, you've got all this area back to the left, but it really pinches off your angle to try to get back, like Mike is figuring out now. He is able to get down there, but not going to be able to get down into the mouth to access the basket. He's going to have a long putt for his birdie. Dan trying to stall that in. Collin, unfortunately, I think cutting it over is a little too much, and that's going to be really close to that OB line where starts going down toward the creek. Jackson with a very controlled backhand. And it's going to catch the edge of the bank. And I do believe Collin stayed in. Very good controlled birdie look there. Jackson, unfortunately, not able to work down to the green. He's going to try it, but airball there. And the grouping there between Dan and Mike, they're literally sitting on top of each other. Dan opting to go first. Big wide straddle. Can he catch a gap here? Try to punch this in for birdie. All four of our card having at least a birdie putt from around circle one. Collin still being Collin. Dan commenting on how much he had to really stretch to have a line at that, and might gonna opt for the forehand here. Let's see how this plays. More or less just a pitch up, maybe a half run, but just get out, get next to the basket. See if Jackson can clean this up for the par. Dan stoically in the background,
There you go.
admiring the mostly dry creek bed. He's going to hop up and knock in pars across the board. Hole 17 was the 8th easiest hole, averaging a 4.2, just over par, and surprisingly no birdies on the day.
This is nice. All the grass, I remember this being all mud, super slick.
Yeah, it was.
A lot of grass growing.
Mike again commenting on kind of the progression of the course over the years, and in the past that slope has been really kind of dangerous with mud and everything. It typically gets really slick in the wet seasons, but we caught it lucky with great weather, not a lot of rain leading up, so it stayed pretty good. Hole 18, this is in the par 4 placement at just a little under 600 feet. This one is going to come in as the 5th easiest, which really surprised me. I figured this hole was going to be playing a significant amount harder than hole 17, but I guess the OB added in kind of equals that out. Great drives are going to move the same way the drone is, landing here toward the short pin, maybe pushing up a little bit further, giving you access to any one of 3 gaps to get into the basket that you see there to the right. This pin is a little elevated, sitting up on a small rock mound, and this one has some OB that goes down the creek line and then up to the parking lot there, forward and left. So shouldn't really come into play too much. All the tall grass here is still fair. I think it would be just a little too unfair to have all of that marked out as well, as Mike saws it off a little short. Jackson going driver and flips that up. And in case you can't see it, he rode left side, barely missed the trees, and cut just under the canopy and sailed all the way to the end of the fairway. Collin, I do believe, with that sidewinder again. He's going to be down in those trees and the tall stuff. And Dan here, what's he going with? It doesn't look that fast. And flips it up, and he was angled right over into there, punches over into that stuff on the right. So no one on our card actually taking the preferred tee shot here, which is going to be a little more of the higher, a little bit of the higher gap on the right hand side, and moving back toward the short pin. And that drop zone you see there is basically for anyone who lands on top of that building, pretty much, or loses their drive. That way they don't have to walk back up the hill. They can throw from the drop zone. Mike, with a pretty good second shot, going to put himself out in probably deep C2. Probably closer to that 50, 55 foot area. And Dan, unfortunately, early releases on the forehand and is going to not hit any of those gaps. It's going to be back in the brush again. And Jackson from just one of the best tee shots I've seen on this hole in a very long time. Easy chip up forehand. Collin from about 108 foot out. Going to give that a half a run there. Dan from looking like C2's edge over there. Maybe a little deeper than that. Getting close to that 75-foot range. This will be a miraculous par save. He has a spin up there and kept it close. So circle two's edge from Mike, and he cashes it. Excellent putt there from Mike. Got that up, kept the turnover perfectly. Hit one of those tiny little gaps, sat it right in the basket, dead center. And I don't know if Jackson just kind of took that excellent drive for granted, or if he caught something early and dropped him down, but he's still just barely 2 circles edge. That is kind of one of the downsides. If you do get something extremely far up the fairway, you can almost pinch yourself off from having, the right gap to get into the green. And it's just almost that the drive is just too good. Dan picking up his bogey. And Collin coming behind, I do believe, for par. And then Jackson will clean up for par as well. There did end up being 4 birdies on the day, 3 others aside from Mike's, and that's going to be Ian Eblin, Andrew Hood, and Rod Cheesebrew. Those other 3 guys, Rod, you're going to hear a little more. He's also making a good push from one of those later cards. And that'll move us into 19. So 19, 20, and 21 are temporary holes that are here for the tournament only. The first of which being basically an island. You've got to cross the creek to land in bounds, and then basically that road that the park truck just drove up right there is going to be out of bounds long, or over to the right, and then long as well. And there is an OB line that goes from the creek up to that road. So you've got to cross to land in bounds. If not, you go to a drop zone. It's a straightforward par 3. You can either take the hyzer route that the drone flew and try to keep pushing as you're hyzering up to get to the basket, or you can take a backhand turnover or forehand through the gap just to the right just on the right hand side of the frame there. Basically, that big sycamore right there is going to make you choose. A lot of people are just going to try to attack with either a flex or something up the middle. Mike turning his over just a touch too much here. A low screaming forehand also works really well. Jackson with the same driver that he used on hole 14. That was indeed a beauty of a shot and just got knocked straight down by that big cedar tree up there. Now those 2 cedars are what really guards the basket from just the dead straight shot. Coming in at just over 300 feet, this, it's still slightly challenging. It does come in as the 7th easiest, so it is kind of still middle of the pack with only a couple birdies. No, actually, sorry, no birdies on the day for this one. Did average a 3.2, so basically just a lot of pars with only a couple bogeys. Dan getting a turnover going in there. Fading out just a little bit early. Collin was going for the forehand shot, just wasn't able to get it up. Jackson trying his best to get a circle 2 bid, and Mike I think he's just really comfortable with that patent pending nose up floater. He almost drops it in there. Even when he's not obstructed, he's taking that shot. Dan gonna try to drop another long one in here. You see up on top of the hill to the left, some folks approaching hole 21 now. That's where we'll end up to finish our round out, as the card drops in their cleanups for a bunch of pars. Like I said, this hole averaged 3.2, all pars with only 2 bogeys on the day. And that probably came with, you know, an OB stroke in there. It is straightforward. Not a lot of people are going to bogey this, but the birdie is still slightly difficult to get. So we still have a pretty wide range of scores coming in right now. Mike definitely wanting to pick up a couple more. He's right on the cusp of being able to make lead card for tomorrow and running out of holes to do it in. Hole 20, 316 feet. It's going to be right there in front of you. The lake and the road are both OB, as well as all of the rough long of this basket. However, all of the beach and the sand is going to play as hazard as well. So the big thing is just trying to get something up flat through that big gap and just stall out and run out of energy by the time it gets to the basket without fading out down to the left. If you go down that, you're going to have a really tricky upshot. Just try to get something through there, up to the basket, and just hang out there. Mike getting his turned over just a little too much. Jackson taking a look at it now. Looks like he's taking that same halo disc again. I'm not sure what that is he's throwing there. But it's got some flip to it, and that looks perfect. Just a little short. That's going to come in right around circle's edge. Collin with the sidewinder and just ripping that late little grip lock. That tree saved him from going OB. So have a wide open pitch shot up to the basket. This is another one of those holes that you shouldn't necessarily see a lot of big numbers on, unless you bring some OB in the play. You're just really unfortunate. But Dan unfortunately squaring that tree, so it actually dropped him straight backwards, so he's going to have to deal with those trees again. Hole 20 came in as the 4th easiest hole, and we'll see how our card plays out before I let you know who got the birdies. I will let you know that there were 3 total out of our field for the day. Came in as a 2.9 average, one of only 5 holes to average under par.
Nice shot, man.
It's a really good run there. Dan looking at about a 100-footer and just doesn't quite keep that turned over enough, and that's going to fade out over to the left. He's got a little bit of an uphill shot back. Collin pitching up from under the cedar tree. And Jackson with a beautiful drive, just about a step out of bullseye. Gonna put that dead center for the birdie. Almost textbook, getting another one of those strokes back that he let go earlier in the round. Alright, so we know it's no one else on our card is going to pick up the birdie. The other 2 birdies belong to, again, Connor Scott and Ian Eblin. Unfortunate miss there for Dan. Collin going ahead and putting out to give Dan a second to take a breath, come back there. And drop that in just over the cage. Yeah, hole 20, probably one of the most picturesque, probably my favorite hole on the course. So we're going to cut there before Mike taps his out, and going to be looking at hole 21. This is the big finale and finishing hole. Everything you've done throughout the course leads you right here to this finish, and you can either cap it off or let all of your hard work crumble away here. So this is going to be 232 feet straight in front of you, par 3, dropping about 40 foot. Maybe not 40 foot. It drops a significant amount. I think I might have exaggerated a little bit, but it does drop down way downhill. And like I said, everything can either be capstoned beautifully or crumble away from you. Because at the end of this 232 feet, you have around the basket, 1, it's an elevated basket, and 2, it's an island. And the size of the island is circle 1. So you've got to land on a postage stamp down here. The wind is actually going to be coming into play because you're back out in the open, right here on the shores of the lake. And you know, you've got to pipe it just dead straight. Jackson opting for straight backhand putter. It's looking good. And that's the danger. So it's going to hit right on the front side of that wall and drop back into the water. So he's going to be moving to the drop zone. Drop zone is a 40-foot death putt right back at the water. If you opt to try for it to save it, you can end up on the Wall of Fame. There is a little tally board of made drop zone putts over there, and there aren't many marks on it. Collin going standstill backhand.
Yeah!
Everyone thought that was good.
Oh, really? I heard you tell me.
But there's a red flag down there, and that's actually the picture and a little foreshadowing of what's about to happen. You see Collin's disc is the blue mid-range there that's leaning up against the boards, but just on the other side of the OB line. And Dan airing that Nomad again, way up and over. Backboards off. Hits Collins, and Collins' disc saves him from being OB. So yeah, they are leaning against each other. You can see him there behind the basket again. Jackson attempting to save the par, airballs it, and right back in the water. And that's the danger. Now going to be putting for 5. Collin stepping up to the drop zone, going to give it his best. And that's the smart run at that basket, is kind of just letting it filter and fall back down. Kind of a half bit at it. You can see our little tournament central we got hanging out over here. Got a couple vendors set up, hanging out. I left the volume up on this a little bit just because you might want to hear this. You'll have to ignore the wind noise. Not that. Unfortunate for Mike, and he knows he's upset. That putt for birdie was actually going to be to keep him on lead card for tomorrow. So that drop stroke drops him down the chase card to try to make a run at it. And Jackson here is for his double and dropping him down to 3. So he's now lost 3 strokes on the back half of this course than what he started. And Collin's just, he can't wait to get off of this. He can't believe he did it. And that's a double bogey without. That's Collin. Hands that in there. 1 birdie on the day on hole 21, belonging to Mr. Connor Scott. I think he was just really, really ready to be off the course. At the end of that, he wasn't 100% paying attention. But here is our leaderboard after round 1. Jackson letting Connor come back to within 1 stroke, so we're going to have a battle on our hands tomorrow. Rod Cheesebrew coming in at even par, just a couple strokes back. And Evan Jarvis still kind of hanging out in the mix there, going to be jockeying for position, but getting to hang out with us on lead card. And like I said, with Mike missing that putt, it was going to be, that was going to keep him on lead card, getting the PDGA number bump over Evan for day 2. Unfortunately, wasn't able to make that putt, so he is going to drop down the chase card. And that is going to wrap up round 1 coverage here at the Black Bear Amateur Championships. We got a return of the Turtles here. These guys were hanging out with us all week, being just super picturesque like always. If you haven't had a chance to get out to Black Bear Disc Golf Course, it is a hike, but it is some of the most just picturesque golf that you'll have in the area in Southern Ohio. You're right in the middle of Shawnee State Forest, and it's just, you're surrounded by nature and wildlife for the entire time. It's absolutely beautiful. It's one of the best courses in the area, and is continually improving, getting featured in events like this every year. So yeah, that is, again, going to wrap up our coverage. Make sure you swing back around. Round 2 will be released shortly, hopefully having my commentary partner back with me. Can't wait to see you guys over there.